All right, well, let's go ahead and get off, guys. My name is Jared Reinwald. I'm the director here at META. With me today is Marquita Myrick. She's one of our META providers. Marquita, do you want to say hello?
Oh. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm excited about this topic because it's something I dealt with in college. So everyone can benefit from hearing about this when you're in college. Thank you for having me.
For sure.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being here. So before we get into the content, it's really important that we just talk about why we're here. So mental health awareness, why discuss mental health at all, right? It's like three main reasons. The first one is sort of connect mental health to other symptoms. When we talk to people or people start therapy, a lot of times they don't realize how much of their other symptoms in their life, like, stomach problems or anger, emotional, and we'll talk about all of that, isn't a component of their mental health. So by discussing these issues, it becomes really apparent that mental health affects all aspects of our life. And then by discussing that, we can promote treatment, and the more people seek treatment, the more it ends the stigmas, which is the ultimate goal, right? So that's why we're here. What are we going to cover? So there's 4 sections. We're going to talk about the signs of stress, causes of stress, and then sort of coping with stress. And stress is a huge term. It encompasses a lot, but we'll do the best we can to sort of talk about what affects college students the most. And then we'll have some workshops and questions, depending on time. Sound good? All right. So here's a definition of stress. It's not all-encompassing, but this one is any, quote, emotional experience accompanied by predictable physical, cognitive, and behavioral changes. I know some stress in life is important and good. Marquita, how do you define sort of stress to kick us off?
Yeah, it's so interesting because the initial thought is anything that stresses you out, right?
Right.
But when I think about stress, I think about environmental circumstances that cause some friction in our lives. That's how I typically describe it. And stress overwhelmingly can lead to, those mental health illnesses. So that's kind of how I look at it. Those unpredictable factors, or sometimes they're predictable, but they cause friction and cause us to feel a certain kind of way emotionally, mentally, and physically.
Yeah, I like that. Friction. Yeah, that's a good definition. Yeah. So the symptoms, we sort of broke it down into 4 sections. The first one is emotional symptoms, which is sort of what first comes to mind when we think of stress, where we're overwhelmed or agitated, irritated. It's when you're literally saying, oh, I'm so stressed out, right? So those are the emotional components, but there's also physical symptoms. The stress activates that fight or flight response. So the body goes into gear with the shaky, sweaty hands, chest pains, rapid heart breath. But also there's a mind-body connection where stress can cause a lot of like back pains and stuff. So there's the physical components of stress where you feel it in your body. And because you're irritable, because you're feeling it, your behavior is going to change too, right? You might not have much of an appetite, or you might try to cope with stress in unhealthy ways, turning into drugs and alcohol. And then there's also those like nervous behaviors, the fidgets, people pulling out their hair, that kind of thing. And then finally, there's cognitive symptoms. So this is when stress is causing us to become forgetful or disorganized, or inability to focus, your mind racing. So it is a whole body experience. And then really the next slide is like frustration, anxiety, and disengagement. Marquita, what are your comments on like the symptoms of stress? How do we know when we're stressed?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the list and thinking about what I commonly see in my practice with adults. And if I had to look at emotional symptoms, the biggest one is the feeling of irritability. People get really irritable, and people around them start to notice more so than them. And that's what tends to push people to therapy. Like, oh, people don't want to hang out with me anymore. People are saying, you seem stressed. So oftentimes people don't even notice it within themselves. It takes someone in their lives to say, you seem stressed. Maybe you should talk to someone. And then when I think about the physical symptoms, I hear headaches a lot. I do get people who talk about migraines, and typically that's been around much longer, but the headaches, and the
Yeah.
muscle pains, like it's interesting how I tell someone something as simple as they're like, I'm always tense in here. And I say, why not give yourself a massage? Okay, you're in class, you're at your work desk. Does it have a recline feature? If you're on a quick break, like massage your shoulders, get that tension out. And with behavioral symptoms, the one I wanted to highlight was the responsibility avoidance, which
Mm,
of course leads to people getting behind on projects. If you're in school, not turning things in on time, right? And people will start to say, it's me, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough. And it really all can just go back to, no, you're stressed. You're under an overwhelmingly amount of stress. And then that last one, mind racing and forgetfulness, like people
yeah.
forget a lot. And again, that leads to you being even more behind, which reinforces that I'm not good enough. I can't keep up with this. Maybe I should drop out, when really you might just need some mental health support. You might need to talk to a therapist.
Awesome. Okay, good. Yeah, and we're most worried about, stress leading to, like, it can lead to anxiety and depression, because when you experience stress a lot, then you become anxious about the anticipation of stress, and then that leads you to become disengaged and all of that stuff. So those are all what it looks like, what causes it, right? So I have a stat here, during 2021 school year, 60% of students met at least one criteria for a mental health problem. So it's definitely been on the rise since the pandemic. I know everybody I talk to has some sort of mental health issue. I think we can all relate. So let's sort of dive in and sort of understand the stressors, because there's so many of them. Time, right? There's never enough time to accomplish everything you need to do. Balancing your school and your social life, balancing your job and your family. There's not enough time in the day to meet everything that's pulling on us, right? Um, Situations. A situation arises, becomes stressful. It could be an emergency, a sudden conflict, maybe you failed an exam, but something came up, like Marquita mentioned, something, it causes friction in your life. And then I talked about like that anxiety, that anticipatory stress, especially for young adults. You don't know what's going to happen. You're planning for the future. That can cause a lot of stress, because there's a lot of pressure on young people to like figure out your life and do all that stuff, and that's not fair. So, and then lastly, there's sort of like this encounter stress, where you're meeting new people, or you're trying new things. Those are all known to cause stress. Anything to add, Marquita, on like these categories?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the typical college student nowadays. Now the typical college student is probably working, while going to college. Whereas when I went to college, it was like, oh, my parents are paying for this, not mine, right? I
Yeah.
had to work my way through college, but that's an additional stressor, right? There may be something that goes on back at home, or you may be contributing to, your family's financial success at home. Someone may still be pitching in when they're in college. And so really learning to time budget, which is what I talk to people a lot about, can be very helpful when you're in college, because people tend to think, oh, these are my classes, and then I'm going to go hang out with some friends afterwards, versus you have all these situational things and environmental things going on too. So why not budget your time? Because you might be budgeting your money, you might be keeping an account of what projects are doing when, but it's good to balance your time so you're not overwhelmed with all of these stressors.
Awesome. Yeah, the Balancing Act, that's the key. We're going to get into that. I did pull like the most stressful factors for college students from like the American Education Center, but it seems like your academic and money seem to be the top one, because really exams, academic pressure, homework, I feel like those are all about studying and keeping up, because that is your main focus, is to do well in school. So that's going to be your biggest stress, and the financial issues, which we'll also dive into. But yeah, we're moving along. So the biggest part of this presentation is going to be on how to cope, because that's what we want. So here's my quote. Rule number one is, don't sweat the small stuff. Rule number two, it's all small stuff. All right. Let's not stress out, right? So how do we do it? breathing exercises. It's sort of like the first way is when your body gets stressed up. There's paced breathing, mindfulness, like putting your mind back in your breath, just to get the body back into balance. Then, as Marquita was saying, relax, those massages, the comfort, like find time to do those things. And let's keep in mind it's different for everyone. So some people are going to find these exercises relaxing. Other ones say that doesn't work for me. And it's a big, but Marquita, how do you relax initially?
Yeah, it's a good question, because some people are like, I don't know how to relax. You hear that a lot nowadays. And I think the reality, Jared, is we have to practice relaxation. That's the reality in today's society, where we're all busy and moving from one thing to the next. Where are those nooks and crannies of your day, is what I tell people, that you can just stop to breathe. And one of the breathing exercises that I love to recommend, because it's scientifically proven to work, is the 4-7-8 breathing method. You literally breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 7 seconds, and then breathe out slowly for 8 seconds. And just imagine like releasing your cares away on that 8-second release. So yeah, I think we have to practice it, is the short answer. You have to make time for this if you want to experience less stress in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the stages. Once you identify that you're stressed, some people don't even know that, then you can move into those relaxation.
Yeah.
So the idea is to set goals for yourself, right? So we mentioned it's a balancing act. So you're going to have to learn to say no. So there are some times where you have to prioritize, which means you might have to let somebody else down. I can't do that now because I have to do this, and be honest. It's tough, especially for people who consider themselves, people pleasers or whatever. But as you're doing it, be nice to yourself. Note your accomplishments. Don't beat yourself up. Anytime you make an incremental step, be like, oh, you know what? I was in a stressful situation, but it didn't bother me, and I didn't get agitated. Good for me. And then reward yourself. Make time for what makes you happy. Life's too short to not follow your dreams. Don't put off what you enjoy doing. Especially, I know a lot of people at Laundry are following their passions. So, Marquita, any comments on setting goals to practice coping with stress?
Yeah, I do think, again, thinking about those nooks and crannies of the day and just reminding oneself of the end goal, which is to be less stressed overall. Again, it's an awareness process, and that's what mindfulness is, which you talked about on that last screen. It's an awareness process. So we have to be aware, hey, what are 1 to 2 things that I can do consistently throughout my day that don't take much time to just relax myself? And the other biggest thing I think about when I look at this this list is the fact that college students typically celebrate after the fact. Woohoo, we
Yeah.
passed that exam. Now let's go out to eat. Woohoo, we got through this class. Now let's celebrate. And what I tell people is you have to get in the habit of celebrating small wins. Like that also leads to less stress, because you're stopping in the middle of it to say, you know what, I'm going to celebrate. And it could literally be by meditating. I'm going to celebrate by going to get a latte, like these small things, because I get you're in college. Finances can be a stressor. So celebrate your small wins, and then also celebrate those bigger ones at the end.
That's awesome. Yep. And if you're having trouble, get support. Asking for help is a sign of strength, not a weakness. There's this stigma that, oh, I can handle it. I don't need any help, but you're not alone, right? So whatever you're going through, someone else is going through something similar. So this is where we're reaching out to anyone else who can help. Obviously, we're going to push talking to a licensed counselor. They're professionals. They can get to the heart of the problem, because they're trained to do that. That's their whole job. And then understand that it takes time. So stress is part of life. A little bit of stress is good. Too much stress is bad. We got to find that balance. So you got to learn to cope. Marquita, any advice to somebody who wants to go it alone and thinks they don't need help?
Yeah. I would tell that person to think about the end goal. If the end goal, if someone has set a goal to graduate in, I don't know how long the average program is there, but if someone has set a goal, let's say to graduate in 3 years, and they're noticing along the way, they're running across that friction, that stress, and maybe it's led to anxiety or some depressive symptoms. Are you really going to reach that goal in 3 years if you don't stop to handle those things? If you don't stop to get support? And so certainly people do it alone, but then they come out very burned out at the end of college, and then they struggle to get a job because you
Yeah.
can't put your best self forward if you're completely stressed out. And that's what people are seeing in the interview, right? And so the other thing I wanted to note is that a lot of people are afraid to go to therapy because it is overwhelming, the thought of working on yourself and having
Yeah.
someone talk to you about your mental health. And I just want anyone watching this to know that good, qualified, and skilled therapists like what we have on META, like what I'm a part of, we know how to take our time with people. We know how to take, we know how to assess someone's situation and say, okay, we can probably go this far today, but not this far, right? And we don't even want to do that. We
Right.
want small changes. So I think it's important to note that even as I'm encouraging people to celebrate small wins, you got to know that therapy isn't just this overnight fix, and you can have a
Right.
therapist on the Meta platform that will take their time with you and really assess how far you can go and how fast.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's like anything else that involves training. It takes time, and it's progressive. So everything you learn, you can build on, and there's always room for improvement. So
It's a good
so
word,
let's dive
progressive.
in. Yeah. So let's dive into some types of stress. So like the financial stress we talk about. So this feeling of I'm broke and broken. Um, what can we do? So this is from an older survey, but basically it said most seniors at four-year institutions reported worrying about having enough money. Half reported they didn't participate because of the lack of money. Yeah, because you're just starting out in life. You don't most people don't have their finances figured out yet because they're working up towards. So there's like old adages like stick to a budget. But I like focus on the future. Like it's tough now, but just know that you're still young. Things will grow. You're working towards something. Another one is be honest with your servicers. So I also work on the IN tuition side and deal with student loans, and don't run away from like your creditors. Like let them know. A lot of them have plans in place that can help you. And then back to the mental health side, like don't compare yourself to others. It always seems like everyone else is earning more or farther along. Just don't worry about them. Just focus on yourself. Avoid temptation. Take small steps. It's really easy to say. It's really hard to do, right, Marquita?
Very hard to do, right?
Yeah.
Even married with two kids, I'm like, stick to a budget.
Yeah. Right.
It's kind of challenging because a lot of college students would probably say, what budget? I'm
Yeah.
not working with much money. Like, what am I budgeting? But no matter what amount of money you have, you can learn to budget. And there are so many free apps that you can do that with. And I liked what you said, Jared, about focusing on the future. Like, okay, well, again, what's the end goal? The end goal is to graduate and get an amazing job. And so right now it's temporary. I love that word. This is temporary. You're just budgeting right now. And soon you're going to be making the amount of money you want to make. And then I also like to think about just this idea of Facebook. It was created, I think, in a Harvard dorm room with Mark Zuckerberg and a friend, right? So many college students have so many skill sets, right? So you might have a little bit of extra time. What are you really good at? Maybe you're good at tutoring. Maybe you
Yeah.
understand that one class better than anybody else, and you're like at the top, and you're like, this is easy for me. Why not make a little extra money tutoring on the side, right? So getting
Yeah.
creative too about how you can reduce financial stress, I think, is a great idea.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Mark Zuckerberg. He and I are actually a day apart in age. So I was in college when Facebook came out, but it's weird because we're like literally a day apart, same year, a day apart. And his life is mine, my life is mine, and we're I'm sure we're both happy with who we are. I don't think we would want to switch. I wouldn't want to switch places. I hope you
Yeah,
want to. But yeah,
that's
don't
pretty
compare
cool.
yourself to Mark Zuckerberg. That's my advice. All right, burnout, right? So I'm overwhelmed. It's hard to study because I can't focus because I'm overwhelmed. Uh, this is the crisis where you sort of reach your breaking point, right? Step one, take care of yourself. Like focus on self-care. So eat well, get plenty of rest, exercise. Like take care of the body. Get support from your friends. You have feelings to unload, talk about it, especially with your classmates. Take time off if that's an option. But it doesn't even have to be like a long vacation. Maybe just taking a couple of hours to yourself can make a difference, especially if you're trying to burn through something. So I know a lot of times we get in the habit of like cramming before a test. And sometimes instead of trying to force yourself for a couple of hours, take a break and then come back to it. Your brain will be better. Set limits. So learn to let things go. And then finally, like have an outlet to release stress. So burnout, Marquita, I'm sure you see a lot of this.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
see a lot of burnout. And I think it's oftentimes the small things, because people come to therapy and they're stressed, right? They're burned out with school or work, or maybe both. I work with a lot of professionals who are doing both at the same time. And I'm like, it's really the little tweaks, again, those nooks and crannies of the day that I'm encouraging people to have more awareness in. And
Yeah.
oftentimes people avoid therapy because, again, they think they're going to be asked to do something grand. No, therapists get that your life is busy, right? And so it might be, when was the last time you talked to one of your loved ones or to a friend? Oh, I haven't, because I've been avoiding it because I'm stressed and I don't want to put it out on them. Well, now you're in therapy, so your conversations are going to go a little different, right?
Yeah.
And definitely taking time off. You ask some people, what are you going to do during this time off, during spring break? And people don't have an answer. Well, what are your hobbies? This is a time to engage in one of your hobbies, you know?
Yeah.
So it really is those nooks and crannies of life where people can make change over time that ends up being something bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. I call it getting nibbled to death by ducks, because that's what it feels like. It's a little bunch of little things, but it
Yep.
adds up. Interpersonal conflicts. So this is I can't stand my fill in the blank. It's like they're trying to make it harder for me. I feel like they're mean. That person is a dirty word. So let's talk about this. Discuss the matter privately. Choose a neutral time. Obviously, communication is the first step to conflict resolution. So be non-threatening, open up with those, I feel when this happens, not on, as opposed to accusatory. Don't blame the other person. Listen to their side. Make an honest attempt to understand why they may be acting that way. Focus on solutions. So don't get sucked into an argument. Just, I know I have a lot of coworkers who'd be like, that it's happened, it's done, let's move on. Seek help. If you can't make peace, find a neutral person who can mediate. Marquita, I'm sure you also deal with a lot of interpersonal conflict, right?
I do. And I love all of these. And one of the things I suggest to people that I think makes all of these a little easier is the compliment sandwich, because it's so simple.
Nice.
You're, in the meat of the sandwich is hey, here's this issue we're having, but you're starting with a compliment, then you hit people with the meat of it, and then you end with another compliment. And I'm really confident that we can work this out, And I think it really helps with interpersonal conflict. But my last tip is one that might be a little counterintuitive, and people might say, whoa, a therapist would recommend that, but really is to put it on ice for a minute. I think oftentimes when there's interpersonal conflict, people think, oh, I have to address this now because it's stressing me out. What if you acknowledge that maybe this person has a little bit of toxicity in them, or you acknowledge that they're stressed out too, and maybe now is not the best time. You're both dealing with finals, or you're both really dealing with a stressor, maybe had just lost a loved one. Maybe give it a few months, and you can even communicate, hey, I know we have this conflict. For me, now is not the best time. Can we schedule a time to revisit this later? So those would be 2 tips, but I love all of these on the screen as well.
Yeah, and I agree with just taking some time to cool off, because time sort of heals it, and you can look at it fresh if you're not all amped up. It's good.
Yep.
Professor stress. So this is common for students where you're just anxious with your professor. If your worker, might be your boss too, but like, I really think that my superior hates me. I feel I can't do anything right. They're going to fail me. This is tough. So, and this is also tough to do too, but put yourself in their shoes. Like, your teachers are human. They make mistakes. If something doesn't make sense, like, try to find clarification, because you're right. Maybe they're having an off day when they said or did something to you, but it's probably not personal. I know it feels that way when but I can guarantee you they usually don't have personal vendettas against you. So try to redefine expectations. So understanding the what, how, and when something needs to be done and what you're working on it, and then repeat those expectations back so that way they're clearly understood. So a lot of times the conflict comes from a miscommunication. One party doesn't understand what was expected of them, and then when they go to deliver it, they're like, I thought I did it right. So before you go off to do an assignment, make sure everything is understood. Obviously learn their preferences. There are certain things that professors or instructors are annoyed by. They each have preferences. So like learn how to get along. Those are sort of open. Marquita, anything to add on dealing with superiors? It's a trait you're going to need your whole life.
Exactly. That's the key part. I think the thing that stands out for me, or that what pops up in my head, is the assumptions that people make. People make assumptions about their supervisors at work. They make assumptions, students make assumptions about professors. They don't like me, they're going to fail me, like what you had on the previous screen. And what I like to challenge people to do is ask yourself, do I know with 100% certainty that that belief is true? And 9 times out of 10, you're going to come and say, yeah, because if they haven't told you, you don't know that that person is trying to fail you, or that that professor doesn't like you. So it really is good to do all these things and to do the thing that people don't feel comfortable doing, but take advantage of those office hours. Go foster a relationship. And again, think about the long-term goal. Long-term goal is to land a job after college, right? So you're going to need that relationship with that professor. So work on fostering that relationship, because it works well for you in the end, probably.
Yeah, that's good advice, because anytime you get to know somebody on like a human level and you realize, oh, they got 7 kids at home, no wonder they're always so tired and stuff like that. But also, like, I'm a middle manager, so I know that when my boss writes an email, you read an email differently than the way you intended to write it. So I'm very aware of when I go to the people under me. So just keep in mind, we're all people. We're all trying.
Yeah, it's a good point.
All right. So lack of support. I don't know what I'm doing, and I feel like there's no one to help me. I'm the only one who needs extra help. I forget everything the teacher says when I get home. I can't stop the anxiety I feel when I'm in class. So we all have that horror moment where you walk away, you're in class, and you feel like you understood everything, and then you go home to study, and you're like, I completely forgot everything, and I don't know what to do, right? So how can we handle that kind of stress? Well, Marquita just mentioned, like, talk to your professors, take advantage of those office hours. You might have to go back. They're not available. Classmates, that doesn't work. Go online. We live in a digital age where you can Google pretty much anything and find support. Another one is to reflect on your performance. So if you're feeling unsupported, it's okay, and you'll be able to catch up after some time. But just be aware that, be like, oh, I didn't take notes. That's why I forgot. So this is common among students, just feeling like I'm the only one who didn't do it, or I'm the only one who failed. Marquita, how do you deal with that feeling of I'm the only one?
Yeah, again, assumptions is what pops up for me. Like, are you the only one?
Yeah.
Do you know everyone's great? Do you know that you're the only one that failed? And especially in classes, like, people get to talking, especially if they're in small groups or studying together. And so you'll know, okay, everybody's under a different level of stress, right? So really individualizing your experience and understanding, okay, I'm in this microcosm, this class that it represents this college. However, I'm having my own individual experience. So what are some of my stressors? Okay, I am lacking support in this area. What support does the school offer? This presentation alone is a form of support. What other things does your school do? Are you showing up to those? Are you showing up to get that support? Because you're missing out on those free tips that your school is offering. So I definitely think all of these makes sense. Google, my best friend, right? Always Googling things. But yeah, and also at the end of the day, reflect on your performance. Again, challenge yourself to say, am I living up to my best standard? Am I 1% better than yesterday? And am I doing the work to get better slowly but surely? So that's my take on that.
Thanks. Yeah, self-awareness is tough. This probably goes back to burnout, but that feeling of there's no way I can get it done. I don't even know where to start. So it's going to be a lot of the same advice, but it all applies, like set priorities, tackle the most urgent demands at work, at school or work first. For me, it's always like, I always did whatever took the shortest and saved the long ones, because that way there's like less on the to-do list. But to each his own. Push back. So if you're not able to get something done, be honest. Say you won't be able to do it, especially in a classroom. If all of the students are overwhelmed, as professors, they usually understand that, and sometimes they give you extension. But if you don't communicate that, they won't know. Take a break. If you can't focus, that's your mind telling you to take a break. So you'll be able to focus after you're rested. Healthy responses, right? So this is the self-care that Meta always talks about, but like good sleep, physical activity, eat well, that'll help you cope. Anything to add, Marquita?
Yeah, these are all good. I'm just thinking of the example of someone in my personal life who was working extra hours at a restaurant during the holidays to get extra money just to pay for Christmas gifts, right? There's an
Right.
expectation in my family that I buy everyone a Christmas gift,
Wow.
but then this person's behind on everything in their life, the school, the work, right? And I'm like, okay, we got to talk about setting priorities, right? What are the
Yeah.
priorities? How are you time budgeting? Are you really taking breaks if you're working a job that you don't need to be working? Because you got to get everyone a gift, and I know it's going way back because I'm talking about Christmas, but I think it's an excellent example to just show how we really have to prioritize well to avoid overwhelming and overloading ourselves, because that leads to more and more stress.
Yeah, and I love that. Actually, I love the Christmas thing, because we had the same problem with, where we have to go to 4 different family functions, and we realized at the end of the day we were so wiped. It's like, well, why are we doing this? Oh, I let's talk about it, and then maybe we can cut back. But if you don't take a step back and analyze that, you'll never realize it'd be like, oh, I don't have to do this every year or every day,
Yeah,
whatever. So
exactly.
let's go through some examples. These are probably more specific to the school music. So this feeling of confidence, like I'm not as good as my peers, maybe I'm not cut out for this. So in this example, I'm studying to become a session musician, but I don't think I'm very good at it. Everyone else just seems so confident. I feel like I'm faking it. I study hard, my grades are okay, but I just don't feel as talented as my classmates. What can I do to build my confidence? Probably pretty common, right?
Oh, very common. Yeah. And I love that last question. What can I do to build my confidence? Because oftentimes people are underperforming, not because they're not good at something, but because their confidence levels are so low. So then that imposter syndrome kicks in. And how can you play the way you would if you had high confidence like some of your peers? So in this one, I'm reading that the person is studying hard. They're putting that time in. The grades are okay. So the grades reflect that they are studying. But I don't feel I'm as talented as my classmates. So then we have to go in and look at, well, what things are you good at? Let's talk about outside of music. Let's put music to the side for a minute. What are you good at? What are some of your skill sets? What are your strengths? And then we can bring music back in and talk about how that person can bring that same confidence into the area of music. So yeah, definitely confidence.
Yeah, yeah, that imposter syndrome. That's a tough one, because you always feel like, oh, I'm just pretending to be this really great one, and you might actually really be great. You never know.
Yep.
Okay, so what about performance anxiety? They have no problem playing music in front of small groups, but they want me to perform in front of 50 people. What can I do to prepare so I don't have a panic attack? I'm sure I can't imagine. I'm presenting to a screen, so, and also an empty room, but also, I definitely would have anxiety.
Yeah, this does sound anxiety provoking. I've of course trained myself to speak in front of large groups of people and to be fine. And I think it really starts with what you're doing beforehand. So a lot of people would wait until the day of the performance and say, oh goodness, the anxiety is kicking in, the panic's coming, right? Versus what are you doing in general every day to manage stress, to keep your body calm and relaxed, right? And again, I go back to the 4-7-8 breathing method. Are you practicing that throughout the day? Not just when you're stressed and anxious, but just in general. You're just in class and the professor's speaking, you're just practicing it because you're teaching your body a calming strategy that it can default to during times of stress. So the reality is that's one piece of the puzzle, practicing those deep breathing exercises before and the day of, if you know you're going to see 50 people. But if there are
Yeah.
50 people in the room, do you have to make eye contact with all of them? I don't make eye contact with everyone in the room when I'm speaking in rooms full
Yeah.
of 100 people. I'm scanning the room and I'm speaking and I'm talking and I'm not looking anyone in the eye unless someone catches me by the eye, right? But that alone reduces anxiety. And then also bringing in that confidence piece. I'm good at this. People are showing up to see me and my classmates play. They must be showing up for a reason because we produce quality work. We have amazing professors at this school. So we're the best of the best. So like boosting yourself up and getting a little conceited before you have that performance. I think it's always a good idea. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of conceit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Because those type of people wouldn't be nervous.
Exactly.
I love that. There's like a Jerry Seinfeld joke where he's like, it's like the number one fear of people is public speaking, and the number two fear is death. That means if I have to speak at a funeral, I'd rather be in the casket than up front. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, definitely a top concern for lots of people. Okay, uncertainty, stress. So I don't know what to do with my life. Sometimes, and this was tough for me when I was in college, but you haven't found that passion yet. You sort of know kind of where you want to go, but I don't know what I want to do with my life. I chose a major, but I don't know if that's really what I want to do. What should I do? I'm worried I'm going to hate my job. I don't care much for any of the part-time jobs I've had. So this kind of, how do you help people who are like, I don't know what to do with my life?
Yeah, I can't help those people, unfortunately. I'm joking. It's so interesting because it's one of the top reasons people come to therapy with me.
Yeah,
And they're like, I know this is like a very small issue. And I'm like, no, it's a big issue. Like,
yeah,
because we're talking about what you're going to do with the rest of your life, what's going to pay for that house you want, that car, if you want to eventually have kids, whatever your lifestyle, it's going to pay for it. So we have to figure it out. I always tell people we can start with a career assessment, right? That tends to give people some ideas about what they could gravitate towards based on how they responded on those questionnaires. But then another one is values. I preach
yeah,
values in my practice. What are your top 5 to 10 values? And for some people, 10 is overwhelming, but let's look at the top 5 values, because if you value financial security, well, then we know you don't want to play music on the street downtown in Boston.
right,
We know that that's not your goal, right? You might
right,
want to be a part of a symphony. You might want
yeah,
to teach at a college. So now we're starting to narrow it down just based on your values. And that's just one example. So for time's sake, I won't
yeah.
give more, but thinking about values, and you can get a free interest assessment online to help you kind of tweak out your ideas about what you might gravitate towards.
Yeah, and the values, it might also supplement, whatever you're doing. So if you don't have a passion in terms of a vocation, maybe you have passion with your friends and family or your hobbies, and that your job sort of supports that vocation. I just quick story. I once worked a summer in the sewer and sanitation department for my job, and you would think cleaning out storm drains and clogged sewer pipes would be disgusting and boring, but the people I was working with were just so much fun, and it was the people that made that job great. So I kind of got it in my head to be like, if I had to shovel elephant dung all day, but I was doing it with people that I love to be around, I could do that because it's the people that sort of make or break it. But that's just one person's opinion. So
Yeah, that's a good
yeah.
example. Good story.
Okay, so last one, collaboration problem. So my classmates are taking credit for my ideas. In a group project, I feel like everyone in my group either ignores me or takes my ideas and claims them as their own. I'm feeling jealous and animosity towards my peers, but I don't know how to bring it up or even if I should. Is it normal to feel this way? Should I care? I'm feeling very stressed trying to collaborate.
Yeah, I think the person should care.
Yeah,
And just so everyone knows, this one continues to happen in corporate America and in the workplace. People love to
absolutely.
take credit for people's ideas.
Yeah,
When there's a collaboration, I usually try to understand what's this person's role, what's this person's role, what's my role, right? Because just because the key word is collaboration, right? We're all not one person, but let's say we have 4 people on the team, then 4 people are bringing unique experiences into it. And so maybe you give just enough of your experience for the contribution. And then that one thing you're afraid someone might take that idea. Maybe that's the one thing you say in the presentation that is kind of like, oh, I'm thinking about this in the moment, but
yeah.
this is also something we could add to this. And it's amazing. And you knew they would like it, but it's kind of a sneaky way, I'll admit. But That one's more of a sneaky way. The other way is to be more direct and have those conversations, which people tend to
Right.
avoid. But you probably wouldn't say, hey, I'm feeling like you all are taking my ideas, but you might say, hey, I really value the spirit of collaboration and making sure we all get credit for the unique ideas we are individually bringing into this. And so how can we as a team make sure that everyone gets credit for their individual ideas? So that's another way to kind of call it out without having to be direct. And of course, if you're just a
Right.
direct person, go for it. I'm not that direct. I would take option 2, but hey, everybody's different. Everyone's
Yeah,
different.
you always want credit for the good ideas, and if it was a bad idea, well, that was a team effort. The team came up with that terrible idea. So yeah,
Yep,
that's a
yep.
tough one.
It's a tough one.
But you'll all right, so we did it. Let me go into Meta real quick. It's a free app for all college students. You can download it. Go to meta.app/students. I think right now /users. They both work. But then you'll see links to either Apple or Android. Download the app. Basically, after you download it, make sure you put your school name in your profile. That'll authenticate you into the app, and then you can just sort of browse providers and just shoot them a message. Tell them how you're feeling. Schedule a session. There's also filters if you want to go specific in terms of what kind of issues, or if you're looking for a specific type of therapy, we have that included. But basically, yeah, pick a provider, send them a message, they'll schedule a session. You meet remotely. Keep a lookout for weekly buzz articles. Talk about the same sort of content that was in this presentation. You can pay by insurance. It's available all year long. So even if you're on break and you're away from everyone, sort of lean to Meta. But I want to thank Marquita so much. It was a great presentation. Thank you for joining. Meet, anything to add?
No, you guys did a great job. Marquita is a wonderful therapist. So hopefully anyone that needs to connect with a counselor reaches out to Marquita. She's one of our best.
Thank you. I appreciate
You're very
that.
welcome. Oh, it was a pleasure working with you.
Well, thank you guys so much for watching this and sticking to the end. We appreciate it. So we'll see you on Meta. I'm going to